We have a couple of really fascinating speakers, and I am actually a member of Rotary, but I'm very much on the periphery of it. But even I know the magnificent work that Rotary has done with others, of course, around the eradication of polio, which is just a stupendously brilliant intervention into the lives of so many people. I'm sure you all are, but you certainly should be immensely proud. Our next speaker is Gary Newton. Gary is a member of the Polio Australia board and is also in, perhaps not a unique position, but unique as far as our experience today, as actually being a survivor of polio as well. So will you please make him welcome to the stage. Gary Newton, please.
Well, hello everybody. How you doing? Look at you all. Gosh. All these smiling, friendly Rotarian faces. Feels good. Feels very good. So I'm Gary Newton. Yes, I'm a polio survivor. And I tell you that simply because I recently met a man who told me he'd been in Rotary for 40 years and had never met a polio survivor before, which I found to be quite remarkable, given the amount of time, effort and money that Rotary put into the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, and because Polio Australia seriously considers there are still hundreds of thousands of polio survivors scattered all around the country. So, just with a quick show of hands, is there anybody in this room who hasn't met a polio survivor before? Oh, some people in the front row. Younger ones, obviously. That's fine, some up the back. Well, hopefully, by the time our time together today is finished, not only will you feel like you've met a polio survivor, but hopefully you will also get the feeling that you know something of my life and the struggle that polio survivors have now been going through for the past 60 years or more. So, let's begin. Hopefully, we will feel like we're connected by the end of this all. Not very good record keeping during the first half of the 20th century in Australia means we don't have exact numbers, but we do know there are over 40,000 cases of paralytic polio between about 1920 and 1965. And the paralytic polio, the most obvious and severe form, only strikes about 1% of the total. So it's fair to assume that around 400,000 people contracted polio during those years. Today, about 60 to 80% of survivors are now living with the late effects of polio. But more about that later. In the first half of the last century, polio was the most feared disease in the developed world. Today, it's a disease most Australians have forgotten how to fear. Polio, a virus spread from one human being to the next, has a long documented history recorded in ancient Egyptian paintings and carvings more than 3,500 years ago. So it's been around a very long time. Until the middle of the 20th century, it defied treatment. Even today, there is no treatment to cure the disease, but we can prevent it, as you know, with vaccinations. Let me share a little of my story. I was born November 2nd, 1952. Normal, healthy baby. I learned to crawl, then stand and walk, all by the age of 9 months. But then just after my first birthday, everything changed for me and my family. On February 19th, 1954, I became very ill with a fever. My legs and arms stopped working. And as it turned out, I won polio lotto. Back then, of course, it was a lottery. And literally everyone had a ticket because there was no vaccine available to prevent it. The initial treatment for polio in the acute phase is isolation, so as to prevent the virus from spreading. Being isolated from family and friends at any age is difficult, but for an infant or child, it is simply traumatic. In my case, I spent 32 days in complete isolation away from my family at an infectious diseases hospital in Melbourne. I can only envision the impact on my parents and how sad they must have felt, because they never spoke about it. Can you imagine 32 long days and nights of not being able to hold their 15-month-old child, comfort me, to stop my crying, or even give me a teddy bear? All they could do was see me through a pane of glass. I don't know how often they were able to visit, if at all. And for the first 2 weeks, they didn't know if I would live or not. It must have been a terrible time for them and so many other parents of children with polio. Because I don't remember those fearful early days, but I do remember the frequent discomfort of growing up as a child with a disability. And of course, the subsequent daily toll of living with the effects of polio. For me, there have been many corrective surgeries, leg braces, crutches, and of late the need to use a wheelchair. I've had 6 major operations and lost about 85 to 90% use of my legs and about 30% or so use of my arms. Moving from point A to point B is getting much more difficult. Like so many other polio survivors, I've paid a price. And yet, without a doubt, I am one of the truly lucky ones, because it could have been much worse. Growing up, I had wonderfully supportive parents and siblings. I've had 2 wives, not at the same time. Got 4 amazing grown-up kids, 6 gorgeous grandkids. Isn't that right, Jill? I've had terrifically interesting, fun jobs and work opportunities, and I have the love and support of loads of wonderful friends, so I feel very blessed. And I truly believe that I am a better person for having had polio. I think I'm more caring, I have better understanding of people who are different, and empathy for people, and I'm more consistent, I guess, or persistent rather, than many people I know. So I choose to concentrate on what polio has done for me rather than to me. I don't dwell on the difficulties, because I've come to understand that everyone, every single one of us in this room, has ups and downs in their life at times. All that said, of course, I wouldn't recommend it or even wish it on my worst enemy. No one wants polio. Now, in addition to being a paralytic polio survivor, I'm a volunteer with Polio Australia on their board. And Polio Australia is committed to standardising quality polio information and service provision. Their vision is that all polio survivors in Australia have access to appropriate health care and support required to maintain independence and make informed lifestyle choices. Polio survivors over 65 are locked out of the National Disability Insurance Scheme. So Polio Australia is looking to improve the health outcomes for Australian polio survivors through their late effects of polio clinical practice workshops for health professionals. An excellent program that PA is running over the next 3 years. The aim is to help them establish a network of professionals that can assist this clinical population. Post-polio syndrome, or PPS, is a diagnosable neurological condition which will affect up to 40%, depending on the study, of people who have paralytic polio. One of the main symptoms is new muscle weakness that gradually worsens. It's often accompanied by decreased muscle endurance during activities, muscle and joint pain, muscle wasting, muscle spasms or twitching, and severe unexpected fatigue. The broader condition, the resurgence of polio-like symptoms, known as the late effects of polio, takes in both PPS and a host of additional biomechanical symptoms, including respiratory problems, swallowing difficulties, muscle contraction and nerve compression, many of which will impact on virtually every survivor of polio. These symptoms vary considerably in the Australian polio community, both in range and severity. I tell you all that not to bore you in tears or death or anything, but so that you can see why the fight against polio is so important. This disease hits you, usually as a kid, stays with you all your life, and then comes back and takes another big whack at you as you start to age. I want to acknowledge how supportive Rotary have been, particularly District 9685 up in New South Wales, in funding the pilot of these clinical practice workshops for health professionals, which became the catalyst for the now federally funded nationwide program. But they've agreed to fund it only for 3 years. Maybe they're hoping we'll all be dead by then, but I think not. I also want to help you understand the need to continue growing support by Rotary for Australia's polio survivors through our Rotary Club engagement program, whereby polio survivors go and talk to Rotary groups. It's a chance for clubs like yours to not only meet a polio survivor and hear firsthand about polio's lifelong effects, but to help complete the second part of the original Rotary International Resolution. Now, 1979, Sir Clem Renouf from Queensland came up with this idea of eradicating polio. And in 79, in fact it was 78, the year before, but in 79, the Rotary Polio Plus program had 2 key objectives. It became their primary focus: the eradication of polio and the alleviation of its consequences. During those club talks, we speak about linking in with our national program manager or using our materials and ask for financial support, maybe $1,000 per club for our many programs, to alleviate the consequences of polio on its survivors. My involvement with Polio Australia began a couple of years ago when I started seeing and hearing disturbing reports of a growing number of people deliberately choosing not to vaccinate their children against a range of preventable diseases. And it drives me mad, it really does. Many anti-vaccination groups are saying they oppose all vaccination of children, despite overwhelming scientific proof about the benefits of immunisation. In reality, of course, there is no legitimate debate about the safety and benefits of vaccines. The science is clear and irrefutable. Recent news that Victoria's vaccination rates are higher than ever before, with more than 95% of 5-year-olds now inoculated, makes me very happy. Speaking of vaccinations, I have just gotten back from India, where we were overwhelmed by the happenings and the incredible Indian and Rotarian hospitality. I went at the invitation of WHO worker and Rotarian Jenny Horton. Jenny's a Queensland nurse who's working in Nigeria to help eradicate polio there. I went with my wife, Annie, who's also my carer, and 3 fellow polio survivors from Geelong, Go Mighty Cats, to help Rotary's End Polio Now campaign. It was a self-funded trip, a passion project of mine, supported by some fantastic public donations, which I gave the name Gary's Polio Project to India, but it was really much more than just me. It was about a whole range of different people. We went to help keep India polio free and rid the world of polio forever, to support polio survivors there and here, and to pay tribute to our parents and the parents of all sick children for the massive time, love and effort that each put into their kids. I'm not sure if you're aware of the size of the logistics of the End Polio Now campaign in India. You can see it on the screen there now. The aim by 2.5 million volunteers was to immunise 172 million children under 5 years old over a day or two, to minimise the risk of the polio virus coming back from Pakistan or Afghanistan and reinfecting polio-free India. Now, if you'll have a look on this screen, and my friend Anthony in the sound booth is going to show you a little video here, you can see how all of it went for us. It was a truly breathtaking and amazing 10-day trip in which we helped launch a polio survivors support group with the help of Rotary, of course, and offered thoughts and ongoing guidance the establishment of a rehabilitation centre for polio survivors in India. Anyone would like to help out with that? I'd love to hear from you. We addressed polio survivors in Vizag about the importance of creating support networks. We attended a school awareness rally, the JKG school, a private school in Gujrabat, which is about an hour out of Delhi. And we did a street parade with hundreds and hundreds of kids. With Rotarians from all around the world, polio survivors and doctors from Delhi and Vizag. We spoke at a Rotary Club meeting there and at an international fellowship dinner in Delhi before a huge international audience of Japanese, South Koreans and Belgians. I even got interviewed on South Korean TV, though I'm not sure what they said to me or what I probably said to them. Anyway, we got to do something, I guess, most importantly, our parents wanted so desperately, but were unable to do for us because there was no vaccine available. We got to vaccinate some kids against polio, and that was very, very special. Another of the things I discovered on this trip was that a large number of Rotarians go twice a year to help Rotary clubs in India reach as many children as possible. There are regular vaccination events throughout the year, but the larger national immunisation days draw huge numbers of children and families and roll up on their motorbikes, 4, 5, 6, all on the one bike, with mum and dad, and it's quite amazing. I would love to go back and take heaps of Aussie Rotarians with us and have you experience this absolutely amazing phenomenon. So if you're interested in going to India with us, a group of crazy polio survivors, contact me at Polio Australia and I'll send you some information. Now, although India is now free from polio, it doesn't mean that they can drop their guard, or the world for that matter. Very close by is Pakistan and Afghanistan, which still harbours small pockets of polio. Small pockets of polio left unattended means a global problem again, of possibly 200,000 new cases within 10 years, according to the World Health Organization. We're very close to reaching a polio-free world. However, until we do, we must and will keep immunising as many children as possible to spare them from a life of disability and pain. Two things I would like you to take from our time together today. Firstly, polio survivors are still here. Not kids anymore, but still going, doing it tough, still needing support. Secondly, remember, all of you in this room, no matter where you come from, are very special people. You are Rotarians and part of a voluntary organisation that is absolutely extraordinary, an incredibly giving group, and I cannot oversell that. And whether you're up here on this stage or down there in the audience or in some far-flung corner of the earth, no matter where, we all want the same thing because we are all polio fighters. And we do it so that no child or their parents will ever suffer from this wretched disease again. Keep fighting. We're very, very close.